You own dirt underneath 11 different businesses, and not one of those business owners has ever asked who you are. Not the pharmacy chain manager who unlocks the doors every morning, not the self-storage regional director who's never met you, not the family running the gas station your grandfather would recognize from 40 years ago. They all pay rent to a name on a piece of paper, and the name means nothing to them. And that's exactly how the wealthiest families in America have kept $1 trillion strategy invisible for 100 years. You just found the door into it. It happened in a county records office on a Tuesday afternoon, standing under a flickering fluorescent light, waiting for a clerk named Denise to finish microwaving her lunch. It starts with a phrase you almost skip past: ground lease. Not a building, not a house, just the dirt underneath one. You'd seen the term before and assumed it was boring, some footnote in a commercial lease agreement nobody actually reads. It is not boring. It is the exact mechanism by which old money families have been getting richer while doing nothing that looks like work. And once you understand it, you cannot unsee it on every corner you drive past for the rest of your life. Here's what you find first: a gas station on a busy corner near your old high school. The gas station company doesn't own the land, they lease it, have leased it for 40 years, and will keep leasing it for 40 more from a family you've never heard of, who bought the parcel in 1974 for $19,000 and have collected a check every single month since, without ever once having to fix a pump, replace a roof, or deal with a customer complaint. You do the math on a napkin at a diner, and the math does something to you. $19,000 in 1974. Today, that same corner is worth $2.1 million. Not because the family did anything, because they never sold. They just held the ground and let other people build businesses on top of it, and cashed rent checks while the businesses came and went. 3 different gas station brands, 2 recessions, 1 pandemic. The rent check never stopped. And that number, $2.1 million, is not even the part that keeps you up that night. The part that keeps you up is realizing you have no idea how many corners like this exist, sitting there, quietly compounding while everyone drives past looking at the buildings instead of the ground. Every strip mall starts looking different after that. Every fast food drive-thru, every self-storage facility, not as buildings, as tenants standing on somebody else's dirt, paying rent to someone whose name you don't know yet, but are about to. The money isn't the point yet. What gets you is the architecture. The fact that the land doesn't need you to run anything. It just sits there, appreciating, collecting rent from whoever is currently trying to make a living on top of it. Restaurants fail, retailers go bankrupt. The dirt doesn't file for bankruptcy. It just waits for the next tenant, and the next, and the next, for as long as the ground exists, which is to say, forever. You call a commercial real estate broker named Philip, who's been doing ground leases for 22 years and doesn't return most calls. He returns yours because you asked the right question. Not how do I flip a house, but who owns the land under the Chick-fil-A on Route 9. He laughs, then stops laughing, then spends 40 minutes explaining something nobody had ever explained to you before. And somewhere in minute 12, he says a sentence that rearranges everything. The families who really run this, he says, you've never heard their names. That's not an accident. That's the whole point. Billionaire families, he tells you, mostly stopped buying buildings decades ago. Buildings depreciate, need roofs, need tenants, need management companies, need you awake at 2 a.m. because a pipe burst. Land doesn't do any of that. Land just sits there and gets more valuable because there is, structurally, permanently, only a finite amount of it in the places people actually want to be. What he tells you next is the part you were not expecting, the part that turns this from an interesting fact into something you cannot stop thinking about. He tells you the strategy has a second layer, one almost nobody who discovers ground leases ever finds, and he will only explain it if you meet him in person. So they buy the ground under other people's ambition. a parking structure downtown, the dirt beneath a hotel chain, 60 acres outside a growing city, years before anyone else notices a highway exit is coming. Then they lease it in 20, 30, 50-year terms with built-in rent escalations to whoever wants to build something on top of it. Publix, Walgreens, a regional hospital system. It does not matter who. What matters is that someone, somewhere, always needs a place to put a building, and the family that owns the ground underneath collects regardless of who wins or loses on top of it. The second layer, the one Philip promised to explain in person, turns out to be about timing, and it is a part that will make you $310 million. You buy your first parcel for $38,000. It's a quarter acre on the edge of a growing suburb outside Charlotte, a patch of scrubby grass a landscaping company had been informally using to store mulch. There's nothing on it. No building, no tenant, no income yet. Your accountant, a woman named Renata, who has handled small business books for 17 years and does not impress easily, asks you what the return is. You tell her there isn't one yet. She asks why you bought it. You tell her because in 9 years there will be a highway exit 400 yards from that parcel. And you know that because you read the State Department of Transportation's long-range plan, which is a public document that almost nobody reads. This is the second layer. Not owning ground before the rest of the world knows it's about to matter. She doesn't say anything for a while. Then she writes it down. 2 years pass. Nothing visible happens. The parcel sits there. You mow it twice a summer because the county fines you if you don't. Your cousin asks what you've been up to and you tell him not much, which is technically true and also the opposite of the truth. There is no dinner reservation for this. There is no moment where anyone claps. There is only the quiet, private knowledge of a date circled on a calendar that nobody else knows exists. Then a national pharmacy chain site selection team drives past the exit ramp that's now under construction and calls a number on the sign you put up 18 months earlier and asks what it would cost to lease the ground for 25 years with 2 10-year renewal options. You net $4,200 a month on a parcel of dirt you paid $38,000 for and never built a single thing on. Your neighbor spent that same year renovating a kitchen he'll never fully recoup the cost of. Nobody congratulates you. Nobody even knows. A second parcel follows, then a third. You start reading DOT long-range plans the way other people read the news. Every morning, coffee in hand, looking for corridors nobody else has noticed yet. Farmland outside a mid-sized Texas city catches your attention, a stretch about to get a new interchange. You buy 40 acres for $310,000 from a farmer named Walt, who's retiring and just wants to stop dealing with irrigation equipment. Walt has no idea what the interchange will do to the value of that land. You do. You don't lie to him, you just know something he's never had a reason to look into, and the not telling him sits with you longer than you expected it to. 5 years later, that land is worth $4.6 million, and you haven't sold an acre of it. You've leased 12 of the 40 to a self-storage developer, 6 to a fast casual restaurant group, and you're sitting on the rest, waiting, the way you've learned to wait, which is the actual skill nobody teaches, and the one thing every billionaire family Philip has ever worked with has in common. There's a man at a real estate meetup who talks about his portfolio the way some people talk about their fantasy football team, loudly in the direction of whoever might be listening. He's got 12 rental houses, a property management headache, a tenant who stopped paying in March, and a roof he's been arguing about with an insurance adjuster for 4 months. He asks what you're in. You tell him ground leases mostly, some land banking. He nods like the words don't fully register and turns back to someone else. In his head, you've already been sorted. Small time, not interesting enough to keep talking to. Good. That dismissal is worth more to you than anything else that happens at that meetup, because the moment someone underestimates what you own, they stop asking questions about it. And the moment they stop, you can keep doing exactly what you're doing without an audience. This is what people get wrong about the strategy. They think it's about being cheap, about avoiding risk, about playing it safe. It's not caution, it's patience wearing caution's clothes. You are not avoiding the game, you are refusing to play the version of it where you need a tenant to succeed for you to get paid.
Your sister calls on a Sunday night, and you can hear it in her voice before she says a word. The specific tightness of someone who has rehearsed a sentence 4 times and still can't make it sound casual. She and her husband want to open a small bakery. They've found a space. The lease closes in 9 days or they lose it to another tenant. They need $60,000 and they need it by Friday or 18 months of planning disappears. You could transfer it from your phone right now, sitting in your car, without feeling it, not even slightly. You don't. Instead, you ask if you can come look at the lease. She goes quiet on the other end, in a way that makes you wonder if you just made a mistake she won't forgive.
You sit at her kitchen table for 3 Saturdays, with the lease agreement spread out between coffee cups, the countdown to Friday sitting over both of you the whole time. You find a rent escalation clause buried on page 11 that would have doubled her rent in year 4, at exactly the point the business would still be fragile. Then a personal guarantee clause, the kind that would have put her house on the line for a business that hadn't opened yet. You help her negotiate a lower base rent in exchange for a longer term, which is exactly the kind of trade landlords, like the ones you've become, actually want, because they'd rather have certainty than a slightly higher number they might not collect. The new terms come through on a Thursday afternoon, 1 day before the deadline, and for about 6 hours, you genuinely don't know if it's going to happen in time. She signs a better lease than the one she almost signed. She opens in October. There's a line by 7 a.m. most Saturdays now. You never tell her what you could have simply paid for. That's not modesty. It's an understanding of what her story needed to be. Hers. Built by her decisions, not softened by your check. The email arrives on a Thursday morning while you're standing at a county recorder's counter, filing paperwork on parcel number 11. Subject line, Portfolio Valuation Q3 Final. You almost don't open it until the checkout line, because Renata's emails have never once needed to be read urgently. You open it anyway. Combined value of held land, ground leases, and related holdings has crossed $310 million. You read the line a second time, slowly, the way you read something when you're not sure you read it right the first time. You stand at the counter. A man behind you is arguing under his breath of a clerk about a lien filing. Nobody looks at you. Nobody knows. You fold the parcel paperwork, put your phone back in your pocket, and drive to the parcel outside the interchange to check whether the storage developer's crew has started grading yet. They have. You watch for a few minutes, then leave. This number was supposed to feel like something. It feels like the same quiet, unnamed feeling you had 9 years ago, standing in a scrubby field outside Charlotte, mowing grass on land nobody else wanted yet. It wasn't pride and it wasn't disbelief. It wasn't enough to tell anyone about. It's the same feeling, just with more zeros behind it now. Which means it was never about the number. It was about the ground and what you understood about it before anyone else bothered to look down. Somewhere in this ordinary week, you're going to watch someone pour their savings into a building, a business, a bet on themselves that depends on the ground beneath it staying friendly. And you're going to notice something you couldn't have named 9 years ago, standing in that county records office waiting on Denise. That the people who win quietly aren't the ones who own what's built. They're the ones who own what everything else has to stand on. So the question isn't what you're going to build, it's what you're going to own underneath it.